the Elijah Reformation series. That's what we call it. We call it God's Fortress. In this series, we will focus on the role of the family and prove that the collapse of this structure is the root cause for the situation the world finds itself in today. Our theme text for the series is found in Malachi 3, verse 4 and 5, the last two verses in the Old Testament. So this is the last message we find in the Old Testament, and it's specifically written for two time periods. It's a message to prepare for Christ's coming. Behold, I will send you Elijah the prophet before the coming of the great and dreadful day of the Lord. Now, what is the great and dreadful day of the Lord? It's when Christ comes the second time. It's great for the saints who have repented and are ready for Christ to come. It's the greatest day we all look forward to. But for those who are not prepared, it is the day of final judgment. It's the day when everyone knows there's no more chance after that. And so what is the message that Elijah will have before this great and terrible day? And he shall turn the heart of the fathers to the children, and the heart of the children to the fathers, lest I come and smite the land with a curse. And if we look around us, this world has been struck with a curse. And we will see how Satan has warred against this institution of the family. In the first few chapters of the Bible in Genesis, we find virtually all the important information we as Christians need. And there in Eden, the very first institution that is established in Eden is the family. The family is established before anything else. And then we have a legal system that's established. Following the legal system, we have the Sabbath that is established. And following the Sabbath, we find a plan of redemption which is established in the Garden of Eden. Now, we as Adventists are very familiar with the legal system. We're very familiar with the Sabbath. And we're very familiar with the plan of redemption. But there's one work that has been greatly neglected in our church and in the churches in the world, and that is the institution of the family. In the beginning, God created, and behold, it was good. So when God created the earth, it was perfect. It was without sin. Adam and Eve were pre-programmed, right? When they arrived, they could walk, they could talk, they could communicate, and so they were adults. But the rest of us come in as babies. Blank, nothing. We know nothing. Everything we are going to know and learn is going to be a result of what our parents teach us and what our parents allow us to be exposed to. We're totally blank other than that. And of course, there's some inherited traits that actually go further than just our parents. But this process of the family, we might ask ourselves the question, well, why didn't God just create us with pre-programmed hard drives with all the information there, and we could just come into this world? We don't need parents. Well, I would like to suggest that the reason for this is to bring man into closer communion with God. The family process allows the human race to relate to God in no other way that it could have if it wasn't for the family. And so as we grow up as children, we develop a relationship with God. But as we become parents, we become, in a sense, like God, because God has the whole universe as His children. But now as we become parents, we have to now discipline, train our children. We see the results of rebellion. We see the results of sin in our children. We see the disharmony caused in our family as a result of sin. And we can really, truly start to relate to God as parents. And we can understand the essentials of a law, of a governing system. And so the family unit is a wonderful system that brings us into closer communion with God. So we have this world that is perfect. And then sin enters the world. And here we have a child. It's my daughter Sarah. And she doesn't know anything. So what protects this child from Satan? Because Satan is like a roaring lion, right? Seeking whom he may devour. She's totally innocent. She's totally innocent. She knows no dangers. And I like to think of it as a game park. And some of you have probably been to the Kruger National Park or maybe yet to Addo. But let's look at life as a game park. And so we take this young girl, Sarah, and we put her inside this game park. And in this game park, we find lions and hyenas and leopards and crocodiles and dangerous things. And Sarah has no chance. And you know what's interesting is if you go into the game parks and you watch, you will notice that the life of the baby is very dependent on the quality of the mother and father. Am I right? And so even in the game parks, if you have a really good mother, sometimes you will see a lion going for a baby buck. And the mother or the father will actually go for the lion and protect that baby. And that lion won't be able to get close. And so we find the same scenario in this world. Sarah is now surrounded with a fortress. And this is what God's plan is. This is God's ultimate plan for man as the family. Around Sarah is a father and mother whose average age is 25. Now remember, Adam and Eve came with pre-programmed information. So never was a child in this world without a circle of experience protecting it. Never. And so round the circle, we find mother and father with 25 years of experience to share and give to that child to protect her from Satan. Because Satan is going to try and get this child. Around this mother and father are grandparents, approximately 50 years. They have 50 years of information. And so mother and father who's 25 years old, they don't need to go and make all the mistakes of those that have been made from 25 to 50. This is in an ideal situation. If that grandfather and that grandmother play their role in that family as God intended them to do, that little child has 50 years of protection and experience on which to tap into, not to make the mistakes of their parents. And, God willing, around that is great-grandfather and great-grandmother. Now, I know in today's society, and especially in the Western culture, especially the white cultures, you kind of want to get the child out as soon as possible. You know, the child leaves home, and we find in some of the other cultures, the children will live at home until quite a late age. And it's interesting to see the success of the different groups, the way they raise up their children. And so, you as a parent, never stop being a parent. Never. When your child moves out of the home, you as the father and the mother are still the patriarchs of that child. They are still under your care and your protection. And we find this in the Old Testament. Right? Up until the deathbed, we will find the patriarch of the father who keeps the family together. I want to read a quote from manuscript 1. There is a sacred circle around every family which should be preserved. No other one has any right in that sacred circle. And I want to caution you, you know, today we have a lot of counseling, a lot of people talking to each other. But remember what goes on in that sacred. And I'm not talking about criminal, I'm not talking about extreme situations. But if you've got faults with your wife, don't go and speak to someone about the faults in your wife. It's a sacred circle, and that sacred circle needs to be protected. And the same with the husband. Don't go and make complaints to any other person, not even the pastor. If there's something you really need to get counsel from, that's an extreme situation. But every time you repeat something, it gets reinforced in your brain. My husband's like this. My husband. If you've got a problem with your mate, you can speak to them, but you can't change your mate. Am I right? Who's tried to change their mate? It's impossible. Prayer is the only solution. Pray for them, but do not harbor grudges against your husband or your wife. The fact is, none of us are perfect. In fact, we come into this world in a real mess. Yeah, Adventist home. I've been shown that there should be a sacred shield around every family. So how important is the family? The Bible is full with family language. Son, daughter, mother, father. Jesus says, I do the will of my Father. The Bible is covered in family language. Jesus comes to break the laws of inheritance passed down to Adam, right? Those are family issues. Inheritance is a family issue. And so we find the Bible is completely full about family. Let's have a look at this important document, Commandments. The 10 Commandments makes 5 references to family, more than any other issue in it. The first one we find in Exodus 20, verse 6, visiting the iniquities of the fathers upon the children. Exodus 20, verse 10, nor thy sons nor thy daughters. Exodus 20, verse 12, honor thy father and thy mother. 20, verse 14, thou shalt not commit adultery. That's to protect the family unit. Exodus 20, verse 17, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife. So God is very serious about the family. Jesus' first coming, the messenger that preceded Christ's first coming was John the Baptist. And he was given a message. Let's see what it says in Luke 1, verse 17. And he shall go before him in the spirit and the power of Elias, which is Elijah, to turn the hearts of the fathers to the children. So what message did Elijah have? Elijah had a message of turning the hearts of the fathers to the children, because John the Baptist must have the same message as Elijah did. So John the Baptist's message was to restore the family. Why? To prepare a people for the coming of Christ. That's the purpose of the family. You should be preparing your children for Christ's return. What's interesting is John the Baptist was put to death because of family sin. Now we know before the second coming of Christ, we did this verse, right? Before Christ comes the second time, the great and terrible day, what will the message be? To turn the hearts of the fathers to the children. And we're going to look at why the father is so critical in this whole setup. I want to read our prophet, our messenger that was given to us for the last days. Let's see what she has to say about the family unit. One great reason why there is so much evil in the world today is that parents occupy their minds with other things to the exclusion of the work that is all important, the task of patiently and kindly teaching their children the way of the Lord. Child guidance. Adventist home. The greatest evidence of the power of Christianity that can be presented to the world is, aren't we interested in that? As a church, we want to reach the world. Well, here's the most powerful way to reach the world, is a well-ordered. Now that's interesting. Why ordered? Why would you put order there? A well-ordered family. Well, God has a specific order, am I right? He has an order in heaven, He has an order in nature, He has an order in the family, which He has ordained. And that order needs to be followed. And what is the order? the husband as the head, the wife as the helper, and the two of them together make up the government of the family, and the children are to be obedient to the parents. That's the order. A well-ordered, well-disciplined family. Now, interesting, 2 points. Order and discipline. And I want to tell you now that Hollywood has done everything in its power to destroy order and to destroy discipline. You know, what comes to mind is that movie called Sound of Music. You've heard the movie Sound of Music for the older folks? One of the greatest movies ever made. It's in the Hall of Fame. It's in the Hall of Fame in America as having influenced society. That movie had a design and a purpose to destroy order and discipline. This will recommend the truth as nothing else can, for it is a living witness of its practical power upon the heart. You see, children by nature are not obedient. Do we know that? And so when you have a well-ordered, well-disciplined family, the world goes, well, wow, what's different? Joshua 24, verse 15. Now, interestingly, Joshua was the leader of Israel. He had a really high position. But this is what the leader of Israel says. And if it seems evil unto you to serve the Lord, choose you this day who you will serve, whether the gods which your fathers served that were on the other side of the flood, or the gods of the Amorites in whose land ye dwell. But, now this is my jurisdiction, but for me and my house, we may serve the Lord. No, we will serve the Lord. You see, the rest of Israel, I can't force you. I can't tell you what to do. But in my home, we will serve the Lord. And this is what we have to conjure when we have a family. The great good done for others will not cancel the debt you owe to God to care for your children. Doesn't matter how much good you do out there in the world. You know, I did a bit of research and a bit of thinking. You know, often you hear about all these great men, but you never hear of their children. Have you ever heard of this great guy? Well, what happened to his kids? Where's his children? Well, I'll tell you what, many of these great men were so busy becoming great for themselves that their children were nowhere, totally neglected. That's why you don't hear about so-and-so's child. He just goes to oblivion and disappears. And so we must be careful of that. The spiritual welfare of your family comes first, before the church. The church can destroy your relationship with your children. And you have to be careful of that. You have to guard against that. You see, the church is a reflection of the family. The family is the institution. If the family is instituted correctly, the church will be instituted correctly. In fact, the Bible tells us clearly that no man should have any leadership in the church unless his family is well run. That's your number one choice for a leader. Does he rule his own house properly? Because if he can't rule his house, guess what? He's not going to rule the church. Take them with you to the cross of Calvary, laboring for them as those that must give an account, mind, character, and personality. By many, this home field has been shamefully neglected. And it's time that divine resources and remedies were presented that the state of evil may be corrected. Our great hope is home religion. Now we know our hope is Christ. But in order to revive this church, in order to get the message out, we need to revive the home. Our hope is the revival of the home. We ask ourselves the question, well, where are all the young people today? How many people come say, well, where's all the young people? Or go back to the home, and you will find what went wrong and why the home people. There are exceptions. There are exceptions. But the rule is, the reason why there are so few young people in the church is because we have neglected our home and our families. Their children are going to destruction before their eyes, and the Lord would have his messenger present before the people, by precept and example, the necessity of home religion. Urge this matter home upon your congregations. This is what we need to do. Pastors need to be pushing this. Bring your families in harmony with God's plan. Parents need to awake from their death-like slumber and no longer neglect the Lord's instructions. Review and Herald. Child guidance. The great reformative movements must begin in the home. You know, I've been in the church for quite a while, and I've been with youth groups, and I've been very involved, and I've been often started stuff, and I've started big youth groups, and I've been involved at Sir David and in many different places. And one day God said to me, you know what, Paul? You're actually replacing the family in what you're doing. You're taking the children away from the parents. And so we come to church on a Sabbath, children go this way, parents go that way. We go to Sabbath lunch, parents sit there, children go off. Then we have a nice babysitting club called Pathfinders. And so children go off to Pathfinders, and I'm not degrading Pathfinders. If your children go to Pathfinders, go with them. I know it's nice to sit with your buddies. It's so lekker to sit there with someone who's going through the same experiences, they're having the same battles with you, and you sit back there and you have a lovely time talking about work and all these problems and all this, and you have a great time. And you know what, you can't share that with your children, and it's so nice. But a parent must die to self. We've got a slogan, a living family is the result of two dying parents. We have to die as a parent to what we want and give our lives to the raising of our children. This is the mission for every single parent to do. And I'm not downgrading church, but what I'm saying is, and Ellen White says, Sabbath is a special time for the family together. And we must be careful that Sabbath does not split our family. Because during the week, how much time do we have with our children? Very little. Very little. And Sabbath, you need to be possessive over your children. Keep them close to you. Go with them. Be with them. The sins of the antediluvians and Sodom. So this is one of the attributes that caused the downfall of Sodom. Everywhere are seen wrecks of humanity, neglected family altars, broken up families. There is a strange abandonment of principle, a lowering of the standards of morality. The sins are fast increasing, which cause the judgments of God to be poured upon the earth in the flood and in the destruction of Sodom by fire. So we find that before the flood, there was a problem with families. We find that in Sodom and Gomorrah, there was a problem of families. We find the prophecy for the end time, saying there's going to be a problem with families. And if the fathers don't turn their hearts to that, I will strike the land with a curse. What about the French Revolution? I want to read this statement. France presented also the characteristics which especially distinguished Sodom. During the revolution, there was manifested a state of moral debasement and corruption similar to that which brought destruction upon the cities of the plain. And the historian presents together the atheism and the licentiousness of France as given in the prophecy. Intimately connected with these laws affecting religion was that which reduced the union of marriage, the most sacred engagement which human beings can form, the most sacred engagement, and the permanency of which leads most strongly to the condition of society. So what leads to the condition of society? The family unit. And so what did the French Revolution do? They took this family unit and they absolutely desecrated it. Let's see what she says. To the state of a mere civil contract of a transitory character which any two persons might engage in and cast loose at pleasure. Do we find that today? Can any two people engage in this marriage today? Yes, you can be male or female, you can be male and male, and you can be female and female. And is it easy to get a divorce? You can just walk in and get a divorce. It's been made very simple. So the divorce rate is like 50%. And you know what? The church doesn't differ. The church doesn't differ to the world. The statistics are much the same within the church. If fens, which are demons, so in other words, if demons had set themselves to work to discover a mode of most effectively destroying whatever is venerable, graceful, or permanent in domestic life, and of obtaining at the same time an assurance that the mischief which was their object to create should be perpetuated from one generation to another, they could not have invented a more effective plan than the degradation of marriage. This is something we need to fight. And I would suggest to any married person, divorce is not an option. Divorce should never be an option. You can separate, but we should stay away from divorce. If there's problems, we can separate, and I'm not asking you to endanger your lives. I want you to understand it. But divorce should not be a word that we as Adventists accept as correct, because it destroys humanity. It absolutely destroys humanity. And we must remember in the Old Testament, when they wanted to go into the promised land, God said, look, the time is not yet right. The time is not yet right. The sins have not filled these people yet. And I want to tell you now that to get a Christian character does not happen overnight. It's difficult to get a Christian character. And a character that we are asked to have when Christ comes. It takes a long period of time. And so what we will find is that there are two distinct lines being drawn between God's people now. And when a generation is finally condemned, and that's what God is going to finally say, there's no more hope for the generation left on this planet. And the one major reason for that is because the sins have been progressively passed down from parent to child, and they become worse and worse and worse. And you get to the point where there's no hope for them. And so we need to remember this. Satan has triumphed to destroy the fortress that would have saved 1,000 evils, the family. God, all the suffering we have is not God's plan. Our work for Christ is to begin with the family in the home. There is no missionary field more important than this. I want to have a look at the husband and the father now, because at the head of this family structure is the father. For the husband is the head of the wife, even as Christ is the head of the church, and he is the savior of the body. And so the father must be the savior of the family. And what did Christ do to save humanity? He gave up everything. He gave up his glory, he gave up his dominion, he gave up his power, and he became a feeble, weak human being in the flesh of humanity to save his children. Because ultimately, he is our Father. Whether we reject him or not, he is the one who gave us life. And so the father must emulate Christ. That is the role of the father. We are to save the wife. We are to save the body, not to be imprisoned by it. A living family is the result of a dying father. If you are a young man and you're looking to become a husband, if you're looking to find a wife or a girlfriend, it's an incredibly noble calling. You know, society in the past have realized the nobility of this calling, and they've done things like lobola. It's not such a dumb system, although we mock it today. But before a man could take a woman, he had to prove himself to be a man of worth. Today, we give our daughters to men that have done nothing noble and proved nothing in their lives today. They just kids. And we give our daughters to them. If you go to lots of cultures, they had different systems by which a man would have to prove himself a man. And even if you go into nature, you know, we went and saw the elephants, and the guy who was showing us the elephants, he told us that if there's a young male, he comes in at about 18 years, they come into puberty, and they can reproduce. If there's older females around there, they will chase that man out. They won't allow that man to mate with them. He's got to go out there and become a bull and grow bigger than them and stronger than them before they will allow him to mate. So even in nature, we have this system. I mean, look at these birds. You know, we've got weavers on our farm, and you know, the man weaver makes a little nest, right? And the woman comes and the lady bird comes and inspects it, right? And she doesn't like it. Prove yourself, man. Before you can have me, prove yourself. Woman, don't sell yourself short. You know, the Bible says you are going to have to serve your husband. Make sure the man you choose is worthy of service. Don't sell yourself short. God will find a mate for you. Don't rush, because I know there's a lot of pressure in today's society, and we know where this pressure comes from. Satan has created this pressure so that our young people will rush and make the wrong choices in life. I want us to watch an interview with a young man, Mario, from the Cape Flats. And I did an interview with him. He was heavy into drugs, alcohol, gang leader. He ended up in Pollsmoor prison. And he should still be there. He should basically have spent most of his life in Pollsmoor. And I want us just to see what the effect is in society when the father figure is absent.
I think because most of us, we grow up, and especially now talking about the areas where I grew up on the Cape Flats, and I've moved all over the Cape Flats, and I've seen that with lots of guys on the Cape Flats, that there is no father figure. And there's that quote that says that in the absence of fathers, the sons turn rebellious. So when the sons turn rebellious, they have no respect for any authoritative figure. They have no respect for teachers. They have no respect for policemen or for any law, rules, or regulations, because there were no boundaries in the first place when they grew up as sons. And that's what makes that most of these guys, they turn to gangs. They got involved with gangsterism because everyone, they are in need of that sense of security that the gangs provide. Right. We will secure you. A father was supposed to provide that sense of security for them, and when the father is not there, they look for that sense of security in the gangs. A sense of belonging is another thing that they want, and when they don't feel they belong into a family setup, you understand, either because of there is no father, or because there's a stepdad or there's a stepmom, and they feel that they don't have that sense of belonging anymore in the family, that they start to go to the gangs, where gangs invite them, where they get that sense of belonging, that I'm belonging to some part of something that's greater than me or myself. And then there's that sense of security, belonging, and intimacy. You understand? You need to have that intimacy, that love that was supposed to be poured out from a father and a son. And when you don't get that, you start to go look for that in elsewhere. You start to look for it in gangs, in girls, in whatever way. You start to look for that love, that intimacy. You understand with other people that the gangs also freely provide.
Right.
And they show you that we just don't say we love you, we will show you we love you. We will die for you, we will lay down our lives for you, we will take your punishment. And that's the love that the gangs are showing for you. And it's like a sweet aroma that is inviting young people to get involved into gangsterism, because all those stuff that the gangs provide, that was the things that the Father was supposed to provide. So for me personally, and from what I've observed within the field on the Cape Flats and in the prisons, there's that lack of fathership that is actually pushing the guys away and pulling the guys into gangsterism. And that is when there's no respect for authority. They start to get involved with crimes and all this type of stuff that they later end up in prison. And therefore you can enter any prison and you will see like there's about 80%, even to 90% of the guys that's in the prisons that have no relationships, either with their fathers or with their mothers, or their fathers are dead in gangsterism, or their fathers are drug addicts, alcoholics, or whatever, but then they have no that relationship or that role that the father was supposed to play in their lives, are absent.
Now, you had an experience where your dad came to your house the one day, and he knocked on the door. Tell us a little bit about that experience.
Well, I was about 16 years old. Like I said, I was on the street since the age of 13. I was at this one boy's house where we lived, and we smuggled wine and drugs and whatever we smuggled at this house. And this one night, my dad came to me. He came to the house to actually come and buy some alcohol. But I was standing there, opening the door. So I looked at him in the face. He looked at me. He asked me, can I have some wine? So I said to him, do you know me? He says to me, no, I don't know you. And at that time when he said to me, I don't know you, it was like somebody stabbed a dagger into my heart. That my own father, my biological father, says to me in my face that he don't know me. I welcome you into the house. I said to him, look at me, look into my face. Do you know me? I'm your son. So it was at that time that he realized that I'm his son. And for me, that was the most heartbreaking thing that I've ever experienced in my whole life. That my own father told me that he don't know me. That was the biggest part of rejection that I've ever experienced in my life. And from that day onward, my life just started to move even more and more worlds apart, from turning rebellious, getting more involved with crime and that type of stuff.
You know, we often look at these gangs and we condemn these young guys. Man, they're just rubbishes. Am I right? Those rubbish guys are hanging on the streets and all this sort of thing. But you know, the Bible says that we must look after orphans, am I right? It specifically mentions orphans because the importance, the role of the father plays in these children's lives is so dramatic. The reason why these gangs are there is because they didn't have parents. The father wasn't there. And he goes on later to say that in Pollsmoor, there's quite a few examples of where the grandfather's in the prison, the father's in the prison, and the child. There's 3 generations all sitting in Pollsmoor. Because Satan knows that if he's going to destroy the human race, he needs to break down this fortress that is to protect us from Satan and his devices. These are statistics from America. What do these have in common? 70% of all juvenile delinquents, 72% of all juvenile murders, 60% of all rapists, 70% of all school dropouts, 60% of all suicides, 70% of all teenage pregnancies. Just by the way, I know in society we say the boy needs a father. Well, my research is showing I almost think the girl needs a father more. You know that? I read a book by James Dobson called Bringing Up Girls. And when you look at the stories where a girl doesn't have a father figure, what she becomes and how it messes up her entire life because she never had a dad. 70% of all teenage pregnancies, 71% of all chemical abuses, drugs, 80% of all prison inmates, 80%, 90% of all homeless persons, absence of a father. Whether by death, whether by drugs, whether by alcohol, whether by whatever. Even could be success. He's so successful. He's making millions. He had no time for his children. You see, and with man being the head of this home, we need to look at what the head of this home's battle is going to be. And I want us to read from Patriarchs and Prophets, page 55. Adam understood that his companion had transgressed. The command of God disregarded the only prohibition laid upon them as the test of their fidelity and love. There was a terrible struggle in his mind. He mourned that he had permitted Eve to wander from his side. Men, remember this. Be careful. Don't let your wife wander from your side. But now the deed was done, and he must separate from her, whose society had been his joy. How could he have it thus? Adam had enjoyed the companionship of God and of holy angels. He had looked upon the glory of the Creator. He understood the high destiny open to the human race. He was not ignorant. Should they remain faithful to God, yet all these blessings were lost sight of in the fear of losing that one gift, Eve, which in his eyes outvalued every other. Love, gratitude, loyalty to the Creator, all were overborne by love to Eve. Now, when you read this, we are the sons of Adam, and we are going to replicate by inheritance what Adam did. And this is going to tell us where man's greatest downfall is going to be. This is where man's greatest battle is. She was a part of him, and he could not endure the thought of separation. He did not realize that the same infinite power who had from the dust of the earth created him a living, beautiful form and had in love given him a companion could supply her place. He resolved to share her fate. If she must die, he would die with her. Satan exulted in his success. He had trumpeted the woman to distrust God's love, to doubt his wisdom, and to transgress his law. And through her, he had caused the overthrow of man, Adam. What does Genesis say? And unto Adam he said, so why is Adam thrown out of the garden? Because thou hast hearkened unto thy wife. This strategy is used through all the stories in the Bible. To destroy the family unit, you must destroy the head of the home, the father. Let's have a look. Adam fell because of the woman. Antediluvial men fell, right? And they went into the woman of the world. Lot went into Sodom because of his wife. Jacob fell for women. He had 2 wives, and now we have this rift in history that's always been there and still happening in the Middle East. Is because of Jacob and Abraham. There was a failed attempt with Joseph, right? With Potiphar, his wife. What about the terrible story of Samson? What a total waste. Destroyed because of a woman. Saul heard the woman saying, David has killed his thousands and David has called his 10,000 and Saul has killed his thousands. And he turns out and he goes to a woman witch. What about Solomon? Need I say anything about Solomon? What about Ahab and Jezebel? Many of Israel's kings, you can read them, all fell as a result of women. Herod and John the Baptist, he was beheaded because Herod didn't stand up to his wife. What about today? What about the call for country living? You know, we're told to get our families into the countries. A friend of mine said, you know what, I would move if it wasn't for Mrs. Lot. Man versus woman's unique battle. You know, women are complicated. Right? It took 4 distinct points to get women to fall. They're complicated. It only took one thing to get man to fall. Woman. You see, man was made with a noble purpose. He was to protect, to look after that beautiful gift of woman. You know, I always think to myself, what would this world look like if there were no women in this world? My wife doesn't like this. But this is my picture. Lies in back on a lazy boy, 3 to 4 days dishes lying around us, fat, overweight, smelly, watching sport, just if there wasn't women, am I right? You know, I think it's Bob Marley wrote and sings the song, "No Woman, No Pride." And it's true. Women are fantastic. They give man motivation. But when the woman is put on top and the system is toppled, the whole family unit falls apart. And this is Satan's plan. You know, we'll come to that. Hollywood and the media, they've architected the modern man. And what does the modern man look like? He's stupid. Am I right? Have you watched these sitcoms on television? Man, the father, he's a Dumbo. He forgets this, he does that, and he's the joker. Am I right? He's always joking, making jokes, and he's everything about fun. He's undisciplined. And of course, he has a one-track mind. Am I right? He has a one-track mind. This is what Hollywood wants you and I to believe. It's a lie. And so everywhere you look in the media, on advertising, they use women to get men to fall. The reason why there's so much emphasis on sex and pornography today is to destroy the head of the home. That's the purpose. Because if the head of the home is destroyed, the family unit falls apart, and like Mario said, you go looking for a father in something else. And you know what? Satan has plenty of homes he is dying to get your children into. Gangs, groups, bars. You know what? When you go to a bar, you sometimes feel more at home in a bar than you do in the church. Am I right? Now, I don't know if any of you have walked that life. You're going to the bar, hey, buddy, and it's like, hey, man. And you walk into the church and like, am I right? Satan sometimes makes the bar feel more like a home than the church. We're like, oh, you see what she's wearing? Oh, did you hear what they did? But in the bar situation, no one really cares what anyone else does. And you can really feel at home in those situations. So Satan has his places that he will attract, and he will cause a family environment if you don't provide it in your home. You see, it's the monster man, the one track. All he's thinking about is the woman. How he can, young men, what do they talk about in school? You who've been in school, it's always about the woman, how we can get the woman. That's the very opposite of what man was. Man should be the one standing there, and if a woman comes onto him, say, look here, God has a purpose for you. I must protect your virtue. That's what man should be doing. But the average man today is trying to prey on the virtue of the woman. Am I right? And you know what? If you're a young man and you're not doing that, there's something wrong with you. This society is totally upside down. And if we are going to have any hope in our church, we need to change this mindset within our families and protect our children from this mindset. Because to be a father is an incredibly noble situation. And it has incredible rewards. And it will bring you closer to God than you've ever been. How many children sit there? It's Fatherless Day again. Sport. You know, we knew some people, and he used to go away on hunting trips. He had 2 small children, and he would go away regularly, 2-3 weeks at a time, and he would go on his own for country trips. Well, he's divorced today. You see, that's nice. But he shouldn't be going anywhere without his family. He can go on business, but if you're going to do pleasure and you're going to do in your recreational time, your family must be with you. You know what? Dobson talks about quantity time versus quality time. Because nowadays, everyone's talking, I'm spending quality time with my kids. And he brings up the example. He says, well, why don't you go to your boss and tell him, you know what? I'm only going to come in 1 day a week. But when I come in, I'm going to spend quality time at work. What will your boss do? He'll laugh at you. You've got to be kidding. You see, quantity shows love. It's an opt-out, this issue of, well, I'm spending quality time with my... No. If your children are to know that you love them, you need to spend as much quantity with them as possible. Forget the sport. There's no time to go and sit and watch cricket on television while your little daughter's playing outside or your son's playing outside there. You need to get off and go and play with them. They need to know that they are important, and that's how they know they are important. You see, when you become a father, you give up your life just like Christ gave up his life for us. I want to read from Child Guidance. It was God's plan for the members of the family to be associated in work and study, in worship and recreation. The father as priest of his household, and both father and mother as teachers and companions of their children. But the results of sin, having changed the conditions of life to a great degree, prevent this association. And so what we need to do is try and get this association back. The state of this world due to failed parenting. If when parents had first begun to live upon the earth, there had been a firm adherence to the laws of God, the world would now be filled with well-ordered families. From age to age, right habits and customs would have been handed down from parents to children, and God would have been loved and honored. We wouldn't have the situation we have in the world today if the family structure had been maintained through the generations. The wickedness which exists in the world today may be traced to the neglect of parents rightly to discipline themselves and their children. Thousands and thousands of Satan's victims are what they are because of the injurious way in which they were managed during children. You know, as we look at this structure, there are very few families that I know that meet God's purpose for them. The fact is, we come from a messed up society, really. And, you know, one of the things that mess up a society is war. And Satan loves war because, you know what happens in war? Who cares? For tomorrow we die. And so men and women sleep with each other because they don't know if they're ever going to see that person again. They don't know if they're going to be alive tomorrow. All morality goes out. Man partakes in atrocities that he would never do. And so the family unit is totally decimated. And you know what? We come from a generation that came out of World War I and World War II. And our parents had no clue of what it meant to raise a family. Because you know what? They came from a war-torn society where the families were totally decimated. And so this has been passed on. And the only way to know how to run a family is to turn to God, who is our Father, and to turn to the counsels that we have been given to find out how to run a family according to God's purpose. God judges a man by what he is in his church, in society, by his checkbook, by his appearance, by his education. No. God judges a man by what he is in his family. One well-ordered, well-disciplined family tells more in behalf of Christianity than all the sermons that can be preached. Such a family gives evidence that the parents have been successful in following God's direction and that their children will serve Him in the church. Their influence glows, for as they impart, they receive to impart again. Philippians 3 verse 13, Brethren, I count myself not to have apprehended. So Paul says, I haven't achieved this goal. I haven't achieved perfection. I haven't achieved the absolute ideal. But there's one thing I do, and this is what we have to do as Christians. We come from messed up families. We've made many mistakes with our children. But there's one thing I do. I forget that which is behind me. And I strive for that which is ahead. I press toward the mark for the prize of the high calling of God in Christ Jesus. And that's what the beauty of being a Christian is. We can put the past behind us and we can start each day anew. And I pray that we will start anew with our families. And may God bless you